What if the familiar image of luxurious 19th century life is nothing more than a beautiful illusion? We are used to seeing glamorous balls, lavish gowns, and elegant candlelit dinners in the movies. However, the hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the endless nightly labor of the invisible staff. When the vast aristocratic mansions fell into a deep slumber, the hard work within their walls did not stop for a single minute. The lives of the respectable masters and their servants unfolded in completely parallel worlds under a single massive roof. And while the masters enjoyed their rest on soft feather beds, a completely different life was bustling on the dark staircases and in the cellars. Dozens of servants moved silently through the dark and cold corridors, performing heavy and physically exhausting duties. They were strictly forbidden from coming into view of their noble masters without a direct order. That is precisely why the bulk of the dirty and noisy work was done exclusively under the cover of night or in the early morning hours. Young maids hauled heavy buckets of icy water and huge baskets of dirty coal up to the top floors. Footmen spent hours polishing the silverware and their masters' shoes to a mirror-like shine by the dim light of candles. Cooks began stoking the massive ovens long before dawn to have time to bake fresh morning bread. All this ideal comfort of high society was sustained solely by strict discipline and cheap manual labor. Domestic servants had virtually no personal time, and their work shifts often lasted 16 hours straight. They slept in tiny damp rooms under the roof or huddled on hard mattresses next to the noisy kitchen. Their unseen daily heroism has forever remained in the shadows of 19th century history. But the time has come to peek behind the closed doors of the servants' quarters and discover the true cost of aristocratic comfort. Watching this video to the end will reveal the secrets of how perfect order was maintained in wealthy homes while their owners rested peacefully in their beds. What if the hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the basements of old mansions? Deep in the night, the hardest and dirtiest part of maintaining comfort in large homes began. Huge supplies of coal had to be hauled from damp cellars up to the upper living floors. This process required incredible physical endurance and absolute silence with every step. Servants used special wooden boxes lined with thick fabric to muffle the sound of the spilling fuel. The heavy containers were carried up narrow, steep service staircases, hidden from the eyes of the owners. Every living room had a fireplace that required thorough cleaning before morning. Metal grates and trays had to be carefully cleared of cooled ash and small debris. Special brushes with stiff bristles were used to remove soot from decorative stone mantels. All the collected ash was transferred to tin buckets with tightly sealed lids to prevent the spread of dust. This stage of the work required the utmost care so as not to stain the expensive carpets and wallpaper. After cleaning the fireplace area, fresh firewood and coal briquettes were laid out for the morning fire. Paper, kindling, and large pieces of coal were arranged in a strict sequence to ensure quick ignition. Metal fireplace tongs and pokers were polished to a shine using a special chalk powder. Every movement of the servants was practiced to the point of automaticity, preventing any accidental clanging of tools against the cast iron grates. The room was left in perfect condition, ready to generate heat instantly at the first request. Transporting coal throughout the house left inevitable marks on the wooden steps of the service staircases. Cleaning these hidden pathways was also part of the junior staff's nightly duties. Damp cloths were used to thoroughly wipe each step clean of the stubborn black dust. The wooden railings were treated with a mixture of beeswax and turpentine to maintain their smoothness and shine. The dark corridors were lit only by the dim light of oil lamps, which greatly complicated the cleaning process. Fuel supplies on each floor were stored in special decorative boxes lined with copper or brass. The interior of these containers had to remain spotlessly clean before a new batch of coal was loaded. The metal surfaces on the outside were polished with soft cloth rags until they achieved a perfect mirror-like finish. Constant contact with corrosive coal dust required regular maintenance of these interior elements. Not a single speck of dust was allowed to disturb the harmony of the luxurious hallways and bedrooms. The complex system of chimneys also required periodic inspection at night. Soot buildup could lead to poor draft or smoke filling the living quarters. Servants checked the dampers and ventilation grills, carefully cleaning them of soot buildup. The use of long metal brushes allowed them to clean hard-to-reach sections of the pipes without making unnecessary noise. All collected dirt was immediately taken outside in special closed containers. Working with coal meant that the staff's work clothes and hands were constantly soiled. Special thick aprons made of coarse canvas were worn over their regular uniforms to protect the fabric. After completing all fuel-related tasks, the servants were required to thoroughly wash their hands and faces. A neat appearance remained a strict requirement even during the darkest and quietest hours of the night. Not a single trace of soot was to remain on the skin by the time of the morning roll call. The night silence of the mansion amplified any accidental sound made during work many times over. The creak of a floorboard or the clang of a metal bucket could wake the resting owners of the house. Therefore, the servants wore special shoes with soft soles that completely absorbed the sound of footsteps on wood and stone. Communication among the workers was kept to a minimum and took place exclusively through prearranged gestures. The atmosphere of night work was filled with concentration and strict observance of the rules of silence. The completion of the coal distribution process merely signaled the transition to the next phase of nighttime duties. Empty buckets and boxes were returned to the deep cellars to be prepared for the following night. The tools for cleaning fireplaces were thoroughly washed and put away in their designated places in the utility rooms. This endless cycle of providing heat and light was repeated day after day without breaks or days off. The invisible labor of dozens of people served as a reliable foundation for the comfortable life of high society. Realizing the scale of this hidden work completely changes our perception of 19th century luxury. Behind every burning fireplace lay hours of grueling labor in cold basements and dark corridors. Liking this video will be a great way to support the creation of new historical content. You can share your thoughts on this grueling process in the comments below the video. Subscribing to the channel will allow you to follow new episodes about the mysteries of past eras. What goes on behind the closed doors of laundry rooms would shock any modern person. Night was the only time when it was possible to tidy up the enormous volume of textiles. Tablecloths, bed linens, napkins, and towels required constant washing and careful care. Large copper cauldrons were filled with water, which was heated on stoves in the lower levels of the house. Thick steam filled the rooms, condensing into droplets on the stone walls and cold windows. Heavy, wet fabrics were removed from the boiling water using long wooden tongs. Coarse laundry soap and lye were used to remove stubborn stains from the snow-white linens. Each item was vigorously rubbed against ribbed wooden boards to achieve perfect cleanliness. The physical effort required to wring out thick sheets and heavy curtains was immense. The workers wrung out the fabrics by hand, straining every muscle in their backs and arms. After washing and wringing, the fabrics were sent to special drying rooms located next to the chimney flues. These rooms were kept at a high temperature, allowing excess moisture to be quickly removed from the materials. The wet sheets were carefully hung on wooden poles stretched right up to the ceiling. The air in the drying rooms was thick, hot, and heavy with the scent of freshly laundered linens and lye soap. Workers had to labor in these conditions for long hours without a break. Delicate elements of clothing, such as lace and silk ribbons, required a more careful approach. They were washed separately in small basins with warm water and mild cleaning solutions. These items were dried on flat horizontal surfaces covered with clean cloth. Each piece of lace was carefully smoothed out with the fingers to preserve its original intricate pattern. A single careless movement could permanently ruin the expensive trim of a dress or collar. Ironing the laundry was no less labor-intensive. Beginning late at night, massive cast iron irons were heated on special braziers to the required temperature. A single iron weighed several kilograms, making the ironing process physically demanding. To maintain the heat, red-hot metal rods were placed inside some iron models. The red-hot metal glided over the damp fabric, leaving behind a perfectly smooth and even surface. Elaborate dresses with numerous ruffles and pleats were ironed using special metal rollers and tongs. Each pleat was formed by hand and set under high temperature and pressure. A starch solution was used to stiffen men's collars, cuffs, and table napkins. The starching process required precise adherence to proportions so that the fabric would not become too brittle or sticky. The prepared items were neatly stacked and separated with paper to protect them from dust. Cleaning outerwear of street dust and dirt was also done exclusively at night. Heavy wool coats and woolen jackets were thoroughly beaten with special woven beaters. Various natural solvents, such as lemon juice or vinegar, were used to remove stubborn stains. Stiff brushes helped lift the nap on dense fabrics and restore their original, neat appearance. The clean clothes were hung in well-ventilated hallways to remove the smell of cleaning products. Special attention was paid to the care of leather goods, gloves, and belts. Soft suede was cleaned with a special rubber stone to remove grease and scuffs. Smooth leather was rubbed with wax-based compounds and natural oils to maintain elasticity and prevent cracking. All hardware, including metal buckles and buttons, was polished to a perfect mirror shine. Every item had to look brand new by the time the homeowners woke up. The scale of this nightly work is striking in its grandeur and ceaselessness. Mountains of dirty laundry were transformed into neat, snow-white piles, thanks to the incredible perseverance of the staff. Laundry rooms and ironing rooms never quieted down for a single moment throughout the dark hours of the night. The quiet clatter of cast iron irons and the splashing of water merged into a single monotonous rhythm of the nighttime mansion. This invisible process of maintaining cleanliness was the foundation of the Victorian notion of high status and order. Behind every perfectly starched napkin lies a story of grueling night work. It is extremely difficult for modern people to appreciate the scale of such efforts due to the widespread automation of daily life. The question arises as to how the human body withstood such colossal physical exertion in hot rooms on a daily basis. The next chapter will reveal the secret of how the front doors were guarded and who greeted late arriving guests. Waiting in the dark corridors held no fewer challenges than working in the laundry room. A secret that has only now been revealed completely changes our view of the servants' nightlife. Far from all their duties were limited to cleaning or laundry in the hidden rooms of the lower floors. A separate and extremely responsible task was waiting for the return of the masters from late balls, theaters, and social receptions. Specially assigned servants had to stay awake in the lobby to immediately open the front door. Ringing the doorbell was considered an unacceptable noise, so carriages were met at the entrance to the house. Waiting in the cold, spacious hall required immense patience and concentration. Servants were forbidden to sit on the master's furniture, so they spent long hours standing or perched on hard wooden benches. Lighting in the main entrance was kept to a minimum to save on expensive wax and oil. Dim shadows from the candelabras danced across the marble walls, creating the illusion of movement in the empty space. Any lapse in vigilance could lead to a delay in greeting the owners, which was punished with severe reprimands. The sound of an approaching carriage served as a signal for immediate action and the mobilization of all forces. The heavy oak doors swung open the very moment the horses stopped at the front porch. Servants quickly presented special stools to facilitate a safe descent from the high carriage to the stone pavement. Umbrellas and raincoats were instantly taken from the owner's hands and carried away to special cloakrooms. The entire greeting process took place in absolute silence, broken only by the rustle of silk dresses and the click of heels. Once the guests had retired to their chambers, the process of tidying up the lobby began. Wet footprints on the marble floor were immediately wiped away with damp cloths. Street dirt brought in from the sidewalks was thoroughly swept out of the house with stiff bristled brushes. Wet umbrellas were opened to dry in special trays designed to prevent water from getting on the parquet floor. The hall had to regain its impeccable and solemn appearance before dawn. The preparations also included receiving the night mail or urgent telegrams from couriers. All correspondence was neatly arranged on silver trays in the study or dining room. Each letter was sorted according to the butler's instructions for morning delivery to family members. To ensure confidentiality, envelopes were never examined under the bright light of lamps. This work required literacy and an understanding of the complex hierarchy within a wealthy Victorian household. Often, the host returned not alone, but accompanied by guests who had stayed the night. This required an immediate response and the preparation of additional guest bedrooms in the dead of night. Servants silently delivered fresh linens, jugs of warm water, and extra candles to the new rooms. Fireplaces in the guest quarters were lit with the utmost speed and care. The house's ability to accommodate unexpected visitors at any hour of the day served as a sign of its owner's highest status. If the carriage was delayed due to bad weather or a long reception, the shift could last until morning. Fighting off sleep under such conditions became a true test of endurance for young workers. Coffee or strong tea to stay alert was often unavailable to junior staff. Servants resorted to short walks down the cold hallway or splashing themselves with ice-cold water from a pitcher. The ability to maintain perfect posture and a fresh appearance after a sleepless night was considered a sign of high professionalism. The gentleman's outerwear, removed in the lobby, was immediately sent for thorough cleaning and drying. Expensive furs were carefully brushed with special brushes to restore the volume and sheen of the fur. Heavy cloaks made of thick woolen cloth were hung on wooden mannequins near gently heated stoves in the service rooms. Wet shoes were stuffed with paper or wooden blocks to maintain their proper shape while drying. By morning, all these items were to be in the dressing rooms in perfect condition. The silence of the reception hall stood in stark contrast to the frantic bustle reigning in the back rooms. An invisible boundary between the world of luxury and the world of hard labor ran right behind the doors of the living rooms. The guards at the main entrance served as the link between the street and the protected space of the wealthy mansion. Their work required not only physical endurance, but also impeccable manners in any situation. This nightly ritual underscored the strict observance of 19th century social norms. Such details of everyday life in the past allow us to better understand the true cost of impeccable comfort. The grueling nightly vigil was just one of the many facets of the domestic staff's hard labor. These invisible guardians sacrificed their sleep to uphold the impeccable reputation of their influential employers. Their silent presence in the dark halls was the absolute norm for that austere era. Liking this historical content will be a great way to support the channel's growth. The secret that people pay thousands for lies in the routine nightly preparation of the wardrobe. The appearance of wealthy gentlemen had to be impeccable from the very first moment after waking up in the morning. To achieve this result, maids and valets spent hours preparing the day's attire. Dresses, corsets, blouses, and suits were taken out of massive wooden wardrobes for a thorough inspection. Every pleat, button, and seam was checked for the slightest damage or stain. Morning gowns required special attention due to the complex, multi-layered construction of Victorian women's clothing. Numerous petticoats were carefully smoothed out and laid flat on special stands in spacious dressing rooms. Lace cuffs and collars were sewn onto the main bodices with fresh stitches, ensuring a perfect fit. Any torn ribbons or loosened loops were immediately repaired using fine needles and silk threads. The process of preparing a single woman's outfit took at least an hour of continuous, painstaking work. Complex women's corsets, made of thick fabric and whalebone, required special care. Long silk laces were carefully untangled and checked for fraying or tears. Metal fasteners on the front of the corset were wiped with a dry cloth to prevent rust. The corset's shape was kept in perfect condition thanks to proper storage on special mannequins. This wardrobe item was the foundation of the correct silhouette, so its preparation could not be rushed. Equally important was the preparation of the jewelry and accessories selected for the following day. Jewelry was carefully removed from velvet boxes and wiped with a soft cloth to remove fingerprints. Silver combs and hairpins were cleaned of lipstick and powder residue using fine brushes. Gloves made of the finest leather were stretched on special wooden forms to preserve the perfect shape of the fingers. Silk or feather fans were carefully opened and checked for the integrity of their delicate frames. Preparing the dressing table involved restocking supplies of cosmetics and perfumes. Crystal bottles of perfume and eau de toilette were dusted and arranged in strict order. Porcelain jars of creams and powder were replenished from large stocks stored in the pantries. Silver hairbrushes were thoroughly cleaned and laid out on trays next to tortoiseshell combs. Mirrors were polished to a perfect shine with a mixture of alcohol and chalk, leaving not a single smudge. Early in the morning, warm water was needed for washing, and preparations for this began even before dawn. Large copper jugs were filled with clean water and left near the stoked stoves to heat slowly. Heavy porcelain basins were wiped dry and placed on special wooden stands in the washrooms. Stacks of fresh, thick linen towels were neatly arranged on shelves within easy reach. Pieces of expensive scented soap were removed from their paper wrappers and placed in silver soap dishes. If the hosts were planning a morning outing or a visit, appropriate outerwear and luggage were prepared. Hats were dusted with soft brushes and their decorative elements were steamed into shape. Umbrellas and canes were rubbed with wax to give the wooden handles and metal tips a shine. Small travel bags were packed in advance, containing all the necessary small items for a short trip. This foresight ensured a calm and unhurried morning without fuss or unpleasant surprises. All prepared clothing and accessories were arranged in a specific order in the dressing room or boudoir. Every item was kept exactly in its place so that the morning dressing routine could be completed as quickly as possible. Valets and maids were required to have a phenomenal memory for their employer's preferences. A mistake in choosing a tie or ribbon could ruin the master's mood for the entire day ahead. Therefore, preparing the wardrobe the night before was one of the most critical tasks for the household staff. Meticulous planning and hours of labor ensured that very ideal image associated with the Victorian era. All the magic of the morning transformation was created by the hands of unseen servants in the dead of night. It is hard to imagine how much effort went into maintaining such a high standard of personal aesthetics. The next chapter will discuss the nightly preparations for breakfast in the spacious kitchens of mansions. How did the process of creating the first morning dishes take place before sunrise? Preparations for the morning meal began in the kitchen long before the first rays of the sun. The massive cast iron stoves required a long time to reach the necessary working temperature. Junior kitchen staff cleared the massive fire boxes of yesterday's ashes and loaded new batches of coal. The fire was lit in absolute silence so as not to wake the residents on the upper floors of the mansion. Thick smoke rose through the wide brick chimneys, and the kitchen gradually filled with steady warmth. While the ovens were heating up, the process of kneading dough for the morning pastries and bread began. Heavy wooden tubs were filled with flour, water, and yeast to create the perfect base. Kneading required enormous physical effort, as the quantities of dough were calculated for dozens of people. The kneaded mass was covered with clean linen towels and left in a warm place to rise. The aroma of fresh yeast dough gradually displaced the smells of coal and dampness from the kitchen rooms. Special attention was paid to preparing meat and fish for elaborate breakfasts and lunches. Large cuts of meat were taken from cold cellars and ice houses for preliminary butchering. Sharp knives glided silently across cutting boards, separating fillets from bones and tendons. Fish was carefully cleaned of scales and innards, then placed on beds of ice. These preparations allowed the head chef to begin cooking immediately at daybreak. Vegetables and root vegetables also underwent overnight preparation before morning boiling or baking. Potatoes, carrots, and turnips were peeled and placed in large basins of cold water. Thinly slicing ingredients for soups and stews required intense concentration and high speed. Scraps were immediately removed from the kitchen in special bins for compost or animal feed. Work surfaces were constantly wiped down with damp cloths to maintain impeccable hygiene in the room. Boiling water was a continuous process, meeting the needs of the entire vast household. Massive copper kettles were constantly on the stove, supplying hot water for tea and washing. Metal teapots were polished to a shine and lined up on the heated stove. The preparation of complex broths also began at night, as they required hours of simmering over low heat. The surface of the broths was regularly skimmed of foam using flat wooden skimmers. Pantries also required attention at night for inventory checks and planning purchases. Groceries such as sugar, grains, and spices were transferred from transport sacks into glass jars. The pantry shelves were wiped clean of spilled flour or dust with soft, damp cloths. Supplies of jams, marinades, and canned goods were neatly arranged by label on long wooden shelves. Strict inventory tracking prevented theft and ensured that all necessary ingredients for complex recipes were available. Specialized kitchen equipment, including meat grinders, sieves, and mortars, underwent thorough cleaning. Metal screens were cleared of trapped fibers, and stone mortars were rinsed with boiling water. Wooden spatulas and rolling pins were scraped with knives to remove dried-on dough and grease. All knives were sharpened on whetstones to maintain perfect blade sharpness before the start of the day's work. The perfect condition of the tools ensured the speed and quality of food preparation. As dawn approached, the head chef would descend to the kitchen to check readiness for the new day. By this time, the ovens were burning with even heat and the work tables gleamed with impeccable cleanliness. The dough had already risen, awaiting transfer to the scorching ovens for baking. The grueling night shift for the junior staff was coming to an end, smoothly transitioning into the bustling daytime phase. The mansion's invisible culinary machinery continued its ceaseless operation, ensuring a life of abundance and luxury. What was never seen took place deep in the night behind the closed doors of the pantries. This refers to the painstaking and responsible process of caring for the family silver and fragile crystal. Massive silver candelabras and trays required even greater effort due to their size and weight. Droplets of hardened wax were carefully removed from the candlesticks with wooden spatulas so as not to scratch the soft metal. Huge punch bowls were polished to a perfect mirror finish, reflecting the flames of the work lamps. The process of polishing a single large item could take several hours of continuous, intense rubbing. The hands of the footmen, protected by thin cotton gloves, performed thousands of repetitive motions in a single night. Caring for the finest Bohemian glass and crystal tolerated no haste or rough handling. Glasses, shot glasses, and decanters were washed exclusively in wooden basins to eliminate the risk of chipping on metal edges. The washing water was warm, with a small amount of vinegar added to give the glass a special shine. The washed glassware was placed on soft cloth trays to allow excess moisture to drain naturally. Drop by drop, the water left the carved facets of the crystal goblets, restoring their transparency. The crystal was polished using special lint-free cloths made of fine linen or silk. Each glass was carefully held by the stem and slowly polished inside and out until it gave off a slight squeak. The slightest excessive force could lead to the destruction of the fragile walls and the loss of an expensive item. Shards were immediately gathered up, and the very fact of property damage was recorded in a special book of fines. Therefore, the silence in the dishwashing room was tense, filled with the utmost concentration. The night silence of the mansion was sometimes broken by the soft clink of silver forks touching or the clink of crystal facets. This sound served as a reminder that the house's invisible mechanism continued its intricate work. The dining room staff were not allowed to sleep until the last knife was placed in its velvet case. Their eyes grew weary from the dim light, and their fingers ached from constant contact with polishing compounds. Yet in the morning, the tables gleamed with immaculate cutlery, stunning guests with its flawless appearance. The hard work of preserving this fragile beauty remained completely invisible to the residents of the upper floors. Luxury was taken for granted, appearing of its own accord each new morning. Only the staff knew the true price of this dazzling silver shine and the clarity of Bohemian glass. The next chapter will explain how the complex water supply system functioned. How did water reach the master's bedrooms before the invention of modern plumbing? Supplying a vast mansion with fresh water was one of the most arduous nightly tasks for the household staff. Before the widespread adoption of central plumbing, water was carried by hand to all the living floors of the building. The sources were deep wells in the courtyard or public water taps on the street. Water was drawn into massive oak buckets, reinforced with iron hoops for strength. Carrying these heavy loads up steep, dark staircases required tremendous physical strength and endurance. Large copper tanks located on the upper floors had to be completely filled by dawn. This water was intended for washing, filling bathtubs, and cleaning the living quarters. Servants made dozens of trips up and down, carrying hundreds of liters of water in a single work shift. Wooden yokes helped distribute the weight, but the strain on the shoulders and spine remained critical. The stair treads often became slippery from spilled water, increasing the risk of injury in the dark. Filling it with warm water required the coordinated effort of several strong footmen carrying large buckets. The desired water temperature was achieved by mixing boiling water and ice-cold well water in precise proportions. After the bath was finished, all that water had to be carefully scooped out and carried outside. Dirty water from wash basins and chamber pots was also removed from the rooms before morning. Special covered buckets were used to silently carry the waste through the service corridors to the cesspools. This procedure required particular delicacy and adherence to the strictest sanitary rules within the wealthy household. Porcelain containers were thoroughly washed, rinsed with a vinegar solution, and returned to their places under the beds. The ideal freshness of the air in the bedrooms was maintained precisely thanks to this unpleasant but necessary work. Keeping the water warm was closely linked to the need to maintain the temperature in the rooms themselves. Large copper or brass hot water bottles filled with boiling water were placed under the heavy blankets of the master's beds. This was done in advance so that the icy linen sheets would have time to warm up by the time they went to sleep. Special braziers on long handles, filled with smoldering coals, were also used to smooth out and warm the bedding. Any carelessness when working with open flames could lead to the ruin of expensive fabrics or a fire. This entire water and heating cycle operated thanks to the incredible perseverance and strength of ordinary workers. The absence of pumps, boilers, and radiators was compensated for by thousands of steps and the lifting of heavy loads. Every drop of hot water in the morning basin was the result of hours of night work on the lower floors. The residents woke up in warm beds and washed with warm water without giving a thought to the mechanics of the process. This invisible lifeline was the true heart of any Victorian mansion. Such a scale of physical labor seems utterly unimaginable and daunting today. The dark side of luxury lay in the endless climbs up the stairs with heavy buckets in hand. Only strict discipline and the fear of losing their jobs compelled the servants to perform these exhausting tasks. Technological progress has forever changed the concept of comfort, erasing memories of those grueling nights. Understanding the workings of life in the past allows us to take a fresh look at the modern conveniences we take for granted. In the labyrinth of the basement, there was a special room set aside exclusively for shoe cleaning. In this small space, permeated with the scent of polish and leather, monotonous yet important work went on every night. Hundreds of pairs of boots, shoes, and slippers were brought here from every corner of the vast Victorian mansion. The young footmen, often the lowest in the hierarchy, spent long hours tidying up these shoes. The lighting here was meager, consisting of a couple of dim oil lamps or cheap tallow candles. The first step was to thoroughly clean the soles and heels of street dirt, clay, and sand. Sharp wooden pegs were used to pry out small stones stuck in the leather seams. Stiff brushes made of pig bristles vigorously swept the dried-on dirt from the sides of the boots. All this dirt fell into special trays to prevent dust from spreading throughout the room. Once cleared of large debris, the shoes were lined up in long rows on wooden racks, awaiting the next stage. Next came the process of applying wax, which was a complex mixture of wax, soot, and oils. The black paste was thickly applied to the leather using small round brushes with stiff bristles. The leather laces were removed from the boots before cleaning and treated separately from the shoes themselves. They were wiped with rags soaked in wax to prevent them from drying out and tearing when tied. Wet boots, soaked in the rain, were stuffed with dry straw or crumpled newspapers to absorb the moisture. Drying took place away from open flames, as hot air caused the leather to crack and warp. In the morning, wooden shoe trees were inserted inside to maintain the perfect shape before being presented to the gentleman. Women's shoes made of thin colored leather or silk required entirely different tools and materials. The use of coarse black shoe polish on such delicate items was strictly and categorically prohibited. Soft suede was cleaned with dry breadcrumbs or special rubber blocks to lift the nap. Silk ballroom shoes were gently wiped with cotton swabs dipped in a weak alcohol solution. Each pair of such shoes was stored in an individual linen bag to protect them from basement dust. High hunting or cavalry boots presented a particular challenge for the night cleaners. The knee-high shafts required a huge amount of polishing paste and physical strength to rub in. The hands of the young servants, blackened by ingrained wax, were carefully concealed beneath white gloves during the day. The smell of the basement faded, giving way to the sense of expensive perfumes and fresh coffee in the drawing rooms. However, with the onset of a new night, the endless cycle of cleaning and polishing began anew. The shoe room symbolized the very essence of class division in Victorian society. The grime of London's streets was methodically scrubbed away in dark basements by the hands of those at the bottom of the social ladder. The impeccable appearance of high society relied on this monotonous, low-paid, and dirty night work. The silent workers of the basements provided the shine that the regulars of high society salons and clubs took such pride in. The arrival of morning meant for them only a brief respite before a new batch of soiled shoes. Ensuring the safety of the vast Victorian mansion at night was a top priority for the senior staff. The butler or a specially assigned night watchman made regular rounds of every floor of the building. Heavy bunches of keys were tightly wrapped in cloth to prevent a loud metallic clang while walking. The security of the locks on all first-floor windows, the back door, and the basement hatches was checked. In the era of gas lighting and open fireplaces, the risk of fire was extremely high. The smell of leaking household gas posed a terrible threat to the sleeping residents of the house. The night watchman sniffed carefully at every closed door, checking the tightness of the gas valves and pipes. At the slightest suspicion of a leak, the gas supply was immediately shut off at the main valve in the basement. The rooms were ventilated with great care so that the cold air would not wake the residents. Any spark in a gas-filled room could lead to a catastrophic explosion and the collapse of the building's walls. The creaking of floorboards under the weight of footsteps was the night watchman's greatest enemy during his rounds. The experienced watchman knew every creaking board in the vast house and skillfully stepped over the dangerous sections. He moved in special shoes with soft felt soles that glided silently across the parquet floor. The silence in the house was so profound that one could hear the ticking of the large grandfather clock in the lobby. To disturb this peace with a loud noise was considered an unforgivable mistake, leading to immediate dismissal. Maintaining order in the libraries and studies was also part of the night patrol's responsibilities. Papers left by the owners on the tables were neatly arranged into stacks without disrupting the overall order of the documents. Half-empty wine glasses were taken to the kitchen, and ashtrays were cleared of cigar butts and ash. Leather armchairs that had been moved from their usual places were silently returned to the fireplaces or desks. The room had to look as if no one had used it since the last general cleaning. The watchmen also supervised the work of the junior staff, who were busy with laundry, shoe cleaning, or stoking the stoves. Brief inspections of the basement areas ensured that none of the workers had fallen asleep on the job. Strict whispers and meaningful gestures replaced loud orders in this system of nighttime management. Discipline was maintained through fear of punishment and the loss of a steady income in a wealthy household. Constant supervision ensured the smooth operation of the entire invisible machinery that serviced the mansion. The outer perimeter of the house also required periodic visual inspection through the windows of the upper floors. Dark figures on the street or suspicious noises in the courtyard could indicate the presence of burglars. The night watchmen were the invisible guardians of the peace and property of the Victorian aristocracy. Their presence ensured that the fires would remain burning in the fireplaces and that thieves would not break in through the basement windows. Straining to listen to the silence wore on their nerves no less than the physical labor of the laundresses. Morning brought them a well-deserved rest, while the rest of the house was just beginning to wake up. This continuous cycle of wakefulness ensured the stability of this secluded and luxurious world. With the first rays of sunlight, the night shift smoothly handed over its duties to the day staff. Quiet and unobtrusive work gave way to the strictly regimented morning bustle in the mansion's corridors. The bathtubs were already filled with hot water at the desired temperature, and towels were warmed by the fireplaces. Valets stood ready with fresh shirts and perfectly pressed trousers from the night's batch. Women's corsets were laced up by skilled hands, creating a flawless silhouette for the morning descent to the dining room. The process of dressing was a complex ritual requiring the servants' full attention and skill. The gentleman's impeccable appearance was a direct result of all the work done throughout the night. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, the final stage of preparing a lavish Victorian breakfast was in full swing. Hot rolls were being taken out of the ovens, filling the room with the sweet aroma of pastries and cinnamon. Copper coffee pots were filled with strong, freshly brewed coffee and placed on trays. Servants quickly carried the heavy trays of food through the service corridors to the grand dining room. The table setting was impeccable. Not a single stain on the snow-white tablecloth, not a single dull fork. The fireplaces in the living rooms and libraries were already blazing merrily, spreading an even and comfortable warmth. The ashes and soot, cleared away late at night, left not the slightest trace behind. The coal baskets were filled to the brim with select, gleaming coal, prepared by the night stokers. Soft armchairs stood in their places, waiting for the gentlemen to settle into them for their morning rest. An atmosphere of comfort and contentment filled every room of the luxurious Victorian house. The gentlemen descended the grand staircase, stepping on the perfectly clean and gleaming wooden steps. The shining banisters reflected the light of the crystal chandeliers, dusted during the night. Breakfast took place in an atmosphere of tranquility, made possible by the many hours of labor from an invisible army of servants. Nothing was to remind one of the dirt, sweat, and fatigue that had accompanied the night's preparations. The illusion of an easy and carefree life was maintained at the highest level. The day was coming into its own, bringing new tasks and new demands on the service staff. The daytime maids began cleaning the bedrooms, and the cooks set about planning a complex hours-long lunch. The wheel of the household never stopped for a second, turning endlessly. Luxury demanded constant service, consuming human resources in vast quantities. The enormous mansions were veritable factories for the production of comfort. Understanding this process shatters the romantic aura that often surrounds literature about the 19th century. Exquisite dresses and high society conversations existed only thanks to grueling labor by the dim light of candles. The history of daily life allows us to appreciate the true value of the human efforts hidden behind the facades of palaces. Every detail of a cozy morning was paid for by someone's sleepless and physically grueling night. The Victorian fairy tale was written by the calloused hands of the invisible laborers in the cellars. This historical overview reveals only a small part of the hidden life within Victorian mansions. The unseen machinery that operated at night formed the foundation of the entire social order of that era. The hard labor of laundresses, stokers, and footmen maintained the illusion of ease and naturalness in the lives of the wealthy. Feel free to leave suggestions for future videos on the hidden sides of history in the comments. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos about the little-known secrets of the past.